And I yield back the balance of my
Gentlelady yields
time.
back. The gentleman from Maryland reserves.
Yes.
The gentleman from Ohio.
Yield a minute and a half to the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Fowler.
Gentleman from Texas is recognized for 1.5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today to speak against this resolution. I'm at a loss. I can't believe the very first time that I have the honor and privilege to address this august chamber is to talk about removing the President of the United States because he held a permitted, legal, and peaceful rally. It's nothing but a wasteful political grandstand. Let's make no mistake. January 6th was a dark day in our esteemed nation's history. It was a dark and sad day. On the afternoon of January 6th, a mob breached our sacred Capitol. Donald Trump didn't. A mob destroyed property and vandalized historic treasures and ran amok on these grounds. But Donald Trump didn't. A mob committed despicable and evil acts of violence against fellow Americans. But Donald Trump didn't. In fact, Donald Trump urged, and in fact demanded, peaceful dissent and nothing more. Our colleagues on the other side of the aisle want us to unnecessarily remove a president when we're measuring the time he has left, not in years, months, weeks, or days. He's got 182 hours left.
Oh, too many.
In office.
Get
You
him
don't
out.
achieve unity by simply saying it. You achieve unity through actions. This resolution accomplishes not unity, but rather is a waste of time and fosters further divisiveness. And I'm going to vote no on this resolution.
Okay.
I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. The
All
gentleman
right, get out of
reserves.
here.
Gentleman
Get the
from
hell out of
Maryland.
here.
I yield to Representative Neguse for 1 minute.
Gentleman from Colorado is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, I had planned remarks here, but I have to respond to my colleague. His words are simply too much to bear. He talks a lot about the mob and culpability. Who summoned the mob? Who encouraged the mob? Who incited the mob? You know as well as I do that the president did. I stood here 6 days ago in this exact same spot, and I quoted Lincoln's admonition that we shall nobly save or meanly lose the last best hope of earth. And less than 10 minutes later, a violent mob breached the Capitol, the first breach of this hallowed building, the citadel of liberty since the War of 1812. The Congress must respond. Our undertaking here is not about politics. It is a matter of conscience. I support the distinguished gentleman from Maryland's resolution. I pray that the Vice President will honor his oath, reconsider, and invoke the provisions of the 25th Amendment. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. The gentleman reserves. The gentleman from Ohio.
Yield 3 minutes to the gentleman from Florida, Mr. Gates.
Gentleman from Florida, Mr. Gates, is recognized for 3
God.
minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, they may be calling on the Vice President, but based on his letter, he's not answering.
Oh, they're bold.
Everybody in this
They're
country knows
emboldened.
that they wanted to impeach President Trump on his first day in office. And it looks like they're going to want to impeach him on his last day, too. But all he did in the middle was rescue our economy, rebuild our military, reform the VA, and reduce America's involvement in foreign wars. Now, I join the bipartisan caucus condemning the violence that we saw at our Capitol, but the hypocrisy is just downright disorienting. President Trump called for protests that would be peaceful and patriotic. He got labeled a national security threat. Yet the gentlelady from California can call on her supporters to get physical and in the faces of Republicans, and she gets the chairmanship of the Financial Services Committee.
Well, la-dee-da.
Republican members of Congress utilized a process contemplated in the Constitution to offer an objection, and we were labeled seditionists. Democrat members of Congress raised funds for groups attacking our police, burning our cities, destroying our businesses, establishing autonomous zones, and they were celebrated as justice warriors. Wednesday, they called for unity, democracy, and healing. Now, just days later, seeking power and political advantage, the Democrats have reverted to the mean. They've
I had
gone
it off for a
back
minute.
to their natural
I couldn't
state,
hear it.
the party of impeachment, removal, and division. They're about to have unified control of the government. Maybe they'd use this time to preview an agenda for the American people. Now, the last two times the 25th Amendment was invoked, it was to facilitate a colonoscopy. Now they're using it to facilitate a transition to Joe Biden. How weird. Why?
How weird.
I'd call it virtue signaling, but there is no virtue in it. This removal effort isn't for America. It's for them, for their ability to showcase and wield power. And we see the power of cancellation and removal on full display in America today. Forbes magazine has called for White House officials to be shamed and unemployable. ABC News has called for the cleansing of the Trump movement. I don't know what that means, but talking about cleansing our fellow human beings sure is scary. Big tech has driven consumers and conservatives off of monopolistic platforms. And then when we created our own platform, Parler, it was nuked from the internet altogether. The gentlelady from New York was booted from a Harvard advisory board because she took an adverse position on electors that had been taken by every single member of the Congressional Black Caucus in 2001. Cancellations for some, celebrations for others, for doing the exact same thing. The President of the United States can't tweet or post on Facebook, but we know from Project Veritas that the principal counsel for PBS can call for the government to steal children from Republicans and throw Molotov cocktails at the White House. We should allow America to heal before America is lost, but that is not happening today. I'd request 30 more seconds.
Please.
The gentleman is given 30 additional seconds.
The deal now is House Democrats just want in on the act. That's the purpose of the resolution today. They want to show you that they can still tear things down. I guess over the next 2 years, we'll see if they're capable of building anything or anyone up. This is a deeply unpopular impeachment. The public wishes we were here dealing with coronavirus, not the virus of Trump hatred that you seem to have found no vaccine for. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. The gentleman from Ohio reserves. The gentleman from Maryland is now recognized.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I heard one of our colleagues say it was the fault of the mob, not Donald Trump. But who summoned the mob? Who created the mob? Who assembled it? Well, you don't have to trust us if you don't like what you call Democrat members. We do prefer Democratic members for the new ones, but how about this? Listen to the chair of your own conference. The chair of the Republican conference, Liz Cheney, said, the President of the United States summoned this mob, assembled the mob, and lit the flame of this attack. Everything that followed was his doing. None of this would have happened without the president. So you can hate the Democrat members all you want. That is the chair of the Republican conference, Mr. Speaker. I yield 1 minute to Ms. Maloney.
New York, Ms. Maloney, the chair of the Government Oversight Committee, is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Like all of us in this chamber, the Vice President and the Cabinet swore in their oaths of office to protect and defend the Constitution from enemies, foreign and domestic.
That's right.
Now they must fulfill that oath by invoking the 25th Amendment. Donald Trump's reckless actions on and leading to January 6th underscore that he is a clear and present danger to our democratic traditions. He repeatedly and blatantly lied, spouting baseless claims of a stolen election and fraud. He called on his supporters to come to D.C. on January 6th, a day which he said, I quote, will be wild, end quote, and willfully incited an armed and deadly insurrection against another branch of our government. President Trump must be held accountable, and we must return to the peaceful transfer of power. I urge a yes vote and yield back.
Gentlelady yields back. The gentleman from Maryland reserves. The gentleman from Ohio.
Mr. Speaker, we would reserve.
The gentleman reserves. The gentleman from Maryland.
I yield to Mr. Clyburn for 1 minute.
The gentleman from South Carolina, Mr. Clyburn, the majority whip, is recognized.
Whip
Thank
it
you very
good.
much, Mr. Speaker. I rise in support of this resolution. In recent days, it has become indisputable that this president is unable to uphold his oath to preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution. On the contrary, he seems only capable of attacking the Constitution. Never before has the president sought to overturn a fair and secure election, threatening state officials to manufacture fraudulent votes. Never before has the president incited mob violence to block certification of his opponent's victory. Never before has the president refused to condemn and demand the cessation of an attack on our country. The devastating bruises on our nation's soul can only begin to heal by removing the weapon used to bludgeon us. The Vice President must invoke the 25th Amendment to immediately remove power from this dangerous president. And if he doesn't, we must vote to impeach. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. The gentleman reserves. The gentleman from Ohio, Gentleman reserves. Mr. Raskin, you may proceed.
I yield 1 minute to Mr. Krishnamurthy from Illinois.
Gentleman from Illinois is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, I'm so glad our friends have changed their mantra from stop the steal to start to heal. But in order to heal, you have to take strong medicine, and that medicine happens to be the truth. My friends, the truth is, unfortunately, this president is no longer fit to serve. We cannot trust this president to protect American democracy after he encouraged his supporters to, quote unquote, fight like hell in storming the Capitol. We cannot trust him to protect American safety after he told these violent seditionists that, quote, we love you, you're very special, close quote. We cannot trust this president to tell right from wrong, even today, when he said that his remarks on January 6th were, quote unquote, totally appropriate. Mr. Speaker, we cannot trust this president to protect us when he instigated a mob that tried to kill us. I yield back.
Yields back.
Well,
The
when you
gentleman
put it that
reserves.
way, I mean.
Mr. Jordan, you're recognized.
We reserve.
Gentleman reserves. The gentleman from Maryland.
I yield 45 seconds to Mr. Soto from Florida.
Gentleman is recognized for 45
seconds.
45 seconds. The gentleman is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I was in the gallery right behind us when the Capitol was breached. Then domestic terrorists breached the rotunda. I heard the loud sounds of gunshots through this sacred chamber. And my last images were brave Capitol Police, guns drawn to protect us. This was the first armed insurrection in over 200 years. And who incited this violent insurrection? Donald J. Trump.
Donald Jennifer
Our
Trump.
resolution states these protests were encouraged by him. He urged millions of his followers to come and stop the steal, which is a lie. And let's say this now for the record and for the ages. Joe Biden won. And for this high crime nearly ripping our country aback, we should be removing him by the 25th Amendment, or he should be impeached.
Back from Maryland reserves. The gentleman from Ohio.
I think we'll reserve one
Gentleman
more.
reserves. Gentleman from Maryland.
I yield to the distinguished Congress lady from California, Ms. Waters.
Gentleman from California, Ms. Waters, the chair of the Committee on Financial Services.
How much time? How much time? How much time?
Are you yielding, Mr. Raskin?
1 minute.
Gentleman yields to the gentlelady, 1 minute. Gentlelady is now recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, on January 6, 2021, domestic terrorists the president has empowered for years stormed the Capitol, desecrated the People's House, and threatened the lives of the Speaker, Vice President, and countless other members and staff. None of us will ever forget that day. The invasion of the Capitol was not only foreseeable, it was inevitable because of the many years the president has spent fanning the flames of hatred and racism in our country. The facts are clear. The president rallied his supporters at the White House and then sent them to the Capitol to disrupt our democracy and overturn an election. I won't spend another second explaining why Donald Trump should have long ago been removed from office. Donald Trump showed us who he was from the very beginning. Too many people turned a blind eye. And last Wednesday, our country paid the price. I yield back the balance of
He
my
yields
time.
back.
Go. I'm gonna go.
How much time do both sides have remaining, please?
The gentleman from Maryland is advised that he has 7 3/4 minutes remaining. The gentleman from Ohio has 8 minutes remaining.
I reserve.
The gentleman reserves.
Mr. Speaker,
Gentleman from Ohio.
Mr. Speaker, I yield myself such time as I might use. This past year, government told Americans you can't go to church, you can't go to work, you can't go to school. 1 hour ago, Democrats told Republicans new rules for the House. Today, you can say anything you want about the president. No rule on decorum, no rule about attacking personality. They can say anything they want, and we've seen that they've done that. Today on the floor, got to wear a mask. If your mask comes below your nose, you're going to get fined. And in order to come in here and debate and represent, constitutionally represent your constituents, the 750,000 people we all get the privilege of serving, you had to walk through a metal detector. And they did all those changes with less than 40 minutes of debate. And tomorrow, they're going to impeach a president who is leaving office in 8 days. 8 days before there will be a peaceful transfer of power, just like there has been every other time in American history. But they're going to do impeachment. They're going to do it again. They've been obsessed with it. It is truly an obsession. People on the Democrat side started calling for impeachment the day President Trump was inaugurated. They attacked him before he even won the first election, before he won in 2016. They attacked him that summer when they started their investigation. This is scary where this goes, because this is more than about impeaching the President of the United States. This is about canceling the President and canceling all the people you guys disagree with. That's what scares me more than anything. We have seen it play out over the past several days. I never thought I'd see the things that we are now witnessing. And I don't know where it ends. But I tell you what, it should scare us all. And I said this in the Judiciary Committee, and the gentleman from Maryland will remember this. The cancel culture doesn't just go after conservatives and Republicans. It won't just stop there. It'll come for us all. That's what's frightening. And I hope you all recognize that. And at some point, we can unite and actually do things that help those folks back home that we all get the privilege of representing. Reserve our time, Mr. Speaker.
Gentleman reserves. Gentleman from Maryland.
Thank you. The cancel culture of violent white supremacy tried to cancel out all of our lives last Wednesday. I yield 1 minute to Congressman Panetta.
Gentleman from California, Mr.
Speaker, on January 7th at 4 in the morning, I was right outside those doors where 14 hours earlier, a rioter was shot as she violently tried to enter this chamber. It was in that early morning and at that location that I had a brief conversation with Vice President Mike Pence right after we finished certifying the Electoral College. I was proud that we did our job that morning, despite the violence we experienced earlier that day. But I knew that was not enough because of the seditious actions by President Trump before that riot and his inaction during that riot. So I said to the Vice President, it's up to you to keep us safe. Tonight, with the President still in office, I'm beyond asking. I'm legislating to compel the Vice President to convene the Cabinet to conclude that the President is not just unable, but clearly he is unwilling and unworthy to discharge his duties. So through this legislation, I ask my colleagues to call on the Vice President to invoke the 25th Amendment, yes, to keep us safe and keep this nation secure. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. The gentleman reserves. Yes. Gentleman from Ohio.
Recognize the gentlelady from New Mexico, Ms. Harrell, for 1 minute.
Gentlelady from New Mexico is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise in opposition to the misuse of the 25th Amendment. To preserve separation of powers, the authors of the 25th Amendment correctly intended Section 4 to be initiated by the Vice President, not by the request of Congress. Process concerns aside, the fact is removing the President from office will not heal our nation. It will not bridge our partisan divides, give Americans hope, or bring us together. It will only make things worse.
Start
to
heal.
Days away until President Trump leaves the White House, and just days into our new Congress, we have more important things to do. We should be working to hold big tech accountable. We should be working to help families and small businesses get through the pandemic. We should be working on jobs, on infrastructure, on energy, and all the other issues our constituents sent us here to address. I am appalled by the violence that took place here last week. Those who assaulted police officers and forced their way into these hallowed halls are responsible for their criminal acts and must be brought to justice. I cannot support the Second Amendment. the 25th Amendment. But I'm also tired of the double standard, the double talk, and the double trouble that we've brought upon the American people, and we have got to stand for our Constitution. This is our Nehemiah moment, and we better take for granted. Thank you. I yield back.
Gentlelady yields back. Gentleman reserves. Gentleman from Ohio.
Reserve.
Gentleman reserves. Mr. Raskin.
I yield to Dr. Bera, 45 seconds.
The gentleman is recognized for 45 seconds.
Mr. Speaker, just over a week ago, we all took the oath of office, all of us, Democrats and Republicans, and part of that oath was to support and defend the Constitution against all enemies, both foreign and domestic. It's quite clear what happened last Wednesday, a domestic attack on our government, a domestic attack on this body. Republicans have already acknowledged who instigated the attack. The lead instigator was the President of the United States. Now, it is our solemn duty to uphold that oath, to defend our Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. There is nothing more solemn than what we have to do. If my colleagues don't want to instigate the 25th Amendment, that's one mechanism. We'll give you an opportunity tomorrow to impeach the President. That's our duty. That's what we have to do. Let's uphold our oath. And I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. The gentleman from Maryland reserves. The gentleman from Ohio.
We reserve, Mr.
Gentleman
Speaker.
reserves. Gentleman from Maryland.
I yield 45 seconds to Mr. Gomez.
45 seconds is yielded to Mr. Gomez.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. We're here tonight because a violent mob incited by the President of the United States, based on a lie, laid siege to Congress to overturn the presidential election. But we have to ask ourselves, what would have happened if that mob succeeded? Why stop at one election? Why not two? Why not make Donald Trump president for life? Thank God that did not happen and they did not succeed. However, even after that terrible day of January 6, 2021, Donald Trump is still using the lie of a stolen election to turn American against American for his own selfish ends. I believe even with only a few days left in office, that Donald Trump is still a danger to our republic and must be removed immediately. And as a fact, and as an example, today the Joint Chiefs of Staff issued a statement support.
Seconds to the gentleman.
Gentleman is granted an additional 10 seconds.
And today the Joint Chiefs of Staff issued a statement reaffirming their devotion to the rule of law and affirming that Joe Biden will be the 46th president of the United States. With that, I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Mr. Raskin, you reserve. Gentleman from Ohio.
We reserve.
Gentleman reserves.
I yield 1 minute to Ms. Velasquez from New York.
Gentlelady from New York, the chair of the Committee on Small Business, is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, I rise in strong support of this resolution. Impressionable children are watching all of this, and they are learning from us. I believe we each have a moral obligation to exercise good judgment and model the behavior we hope they will emulate. That was Betsy DeVos. As I am sure is the case with many of you, it has deeply troubled me in a way that I simply cannot set aside. That was Elaine Chao. Mr. Speaker, these were members of the President's own cabinet who bore the sacred responsibility of taking action when the President is clearly unfit for office. But their words are all talk, and if they will not act, then Congress will. So today, we are giving the Vice President 24 hours to do right by the American people. Remove this President from office, and if you do not, the House will impeach. I yield back.
He yields back. The gentleman reserves. The gentleman from Ohio.
We reserve.
Gentleman reserves. Back to you, Mr. Raskin.
I yield 1 minute to the distinguished gentleman from California, Mr. Schiff.
The gentleman from California, Mr. Schiff, is recognized for 1 minute.
6 days ago, I was standing right here, fulfilling my constitutional duties to certify the election. And 6 days ago, Donald Trump was on the Mall, whipping a mob into a frenzy with false claims of stolen elections and unconstitutional schemes. It was a big lie, the same big lie he had been telling for weeks. He told the mob, "We are going to the Capitol and to fight like hell," and they did. 5 died, many more were hurt, and we were seconds away from something much worse. My colleagues, upholding our oath, the Constitution, and our democracy means recognizing that every second that Donald Trump is president, the nation is at risk. We have the power to do something about it. Mike Pence must do his duty, invoke the 25th, and if he won't, we will move with urgency to do ours and impeach Donald Trump again.
Again.
I yield back.
Where is it? Where is it? Where is it?
Again. From Maryland, the gentleman from Maryland is advised that he has 2 3/4 minutes remaining. The gentleman from Ohio is advised that he has 4 3/4 minutes remaining. The gentleman from Ohio.
Yield 3 minutes to the gentleman from Ohio, Mr. Davidson.
The gentleman from Ohio is recognized. 3 minutes.
I thank the gentleman. Mr. Speaker, I can't say it better than the Vice President said it himself. Vice President Mike Pence said, "Last week I did not yield to pressure to exert power beyond my constitutional authority to determine the outcome of the election. And I will not now yield to efforts in the House of Representatives to play political games at a time so serious in the life of our nation." I ask unanimous consent to submit this to the record.
Without objection.
I thank the Vice President for his excellent leadership, for his professionalism, and frankly for his faithfulness to our Constitution. Not only would it be an abuse of the 25th Amendment for Mike Pence to invoke it to make a political statement, it's clearly not our role in Congress to do what we're doing here tonight, or is proposed to do by the majority. Speaker Pelosi claims that President Trump incited the mob that attacked the Capitol at a rally. Well, as Mr. McClintock spoke earlier, he read the president's statement. He encouraged people to come peacefully and patriotically. The Washington Post is reporting something that I would hope that our chairman of the Intel Committee would know about. The FBI report warned of war at the Capitol the day before the attack on our Capitol. I'm curious how someone proposes that the president incited the mob at a rally the day before the rally.
We can tell you. He
I ask
tweeted
unanimous
it.
consent the article be
It's on
submitted
Twitter.
to the record.
It's archived. Everybody saw it.
You know, others are reporting a timeline that has the breach out of sync as well, but that highlights the important. There's far too little that we know about this attack on our Capitol. Here's what we do know. No one has defended this attack on our Capitol. On our contrary, we are missing, willfully missing, in my opinion, a moment of extreme unity in our nation, just like was willfully done earlier this year. At a time of great political and partisan division, even seething anger, one thing all Americans seem to agree on: these attacks were wrong. The president condemned them. He discouraged violence.
He's condemning
not just
them.
on January 6th, but on other days throughout the year, as he talked about law and order, as he talked about something that we finally seem to agree on, that there is a clear distinction between the Constitution's First Amendment protection of the right to assemble peaceably and riots. Criminal, unlawful riots. There's a distinction between rioters and protesters, and frankly, it took us months to agree on that as a body in Congress, but the people of the United States of America agreed to it. They understood it. So I encourage my colleagues across the political spectrum, the members of Congress here gathered together today and tomorrow, to stand united and move forward with the agreement our country has. This was wrong, and it was not.
The gentleman from Ohio.
30, additional.
Gentleman from Ohio reserves.
Reserve.
Gentleman from Maryland.
3/4 of a minute to Mr. Espaillat from New York.
Gentleman from New York, Mr. Espaillat, is recognized for 45 seconds.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We've all known for a while now, but this past week, it has become undeniably clear Donald J. Trump is unfit. To the Secretary of Agriculture, Defense, Commerce and Education and Transportation. He is unfit. To the Secretaries of Human Services, Homeland Security, Housing, Interior, and Labor, he is unfit. To the Attorney General, he is unfit. To the Vice President of the United States, he summons his goons. They shed their hoods and came with their racist Confederate flag to assassinate him, to assassinate his president. He is unfit. Invoke the 25th Amendment. If not, we will impeach him tomorrow, and I yield back.
Goes back. The gentleman reserved. Gentleman from Ohio reserves. Mr. Raskin.
I'm yielding 45 seconds to Mr. Davis of Illinois.
The gentleman from Illinois, Mr. Danny Davis, recognized for 45 seconds.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. After listening to all that I still have the faith and belief that we can come together as a unit. I was reading my Bible the other day and saw that it said, "Come and let us reason together. Otherwise, we shall all be destroyed by the edge of the sword." I say to my colleagues, let's reason together. You cannot erase truth with a lie. You cannot pretend that what has happened did not happen. Yes, we ought to have a president, but it's time for this one to go. I urge passage of this resolution and agree wholeheartedly.
The gentleman yields back. The gentleman reserves. The gentleman from Ohio.
We reserve.
He reserves. Mr. Raskin.
I yield 45 seconds to the distinguished gentleman from California, Mr. Thompson.
Mr. Thompson is recognized for 45 seconds.
Mr. Speaker, the President of the United States incited an attack against our democracy. For months, he ginned up his supporters with lies about our election and incited them to violence. On the 6th of January, he unleashed a mob on the Capitol. The President must be held accountable for this vile attack. He knew what he was doing, and now 5 people are dead. Congress will not be intimidated. America will not succumb to mob rule. The Vice President can initiate removal of the President who's unfit for office, and this President is unfit. He must be removed. I urge a yes vote on this resolution, and I urge a yes vote on impeachment tomorrow. And I yield back.
Gentleman yields back.
My time.
The gentleman from Maryland reserves. Do you reserve?
Well, we have one last speaker. Is the gentleman prepared to close?
I'm prepared to close.
Ohio prepared to close? Ohio is recognized.
I thought you had one last speaker.
But we'll go after you.
Oh, no, I know you
We'll close on my speaker.
Okay, okay. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. What happened at the Capitol on January 6th was as wrong can be. It's not what America's about. And we condemn this violence. We commend the men and women of the Capitol Police for their bravery, and we mourn the loss of those lives that were taken last week. Republicans have been consistent. We condemned the violence last summer. We condemned the violence last week. Democrats have been consistent about one thing: their endless quest to overturn the 2016 election. I mean, they're still trying to overturn the 2016 election after the 2020 election.
Believe this? Those bastards.
This has been an obsession with you guys. And the first round, the first impeachment, based on the anonymous whistleblower that the country could have, you tried to remove President Trump from office.
He's bringing out the
based on
hits.
a guy that we weren't even allowed to see, know who he or she was, couldn't cross-examine him, anonymous whistleblower with no firsthand knowledge, who was biased against the president and who worked, interestingly enough, for Joe Biden. So continuing this quest is not, as been said so many times on the floor tonight, not what the country needs. Not what the country needs, particularly after the year the country has lived through. So I hope we will not vote for this, that this thing will go down, and I urge my colleagues to vote against the resolution.
Is he wearing a diaper on his
sponsored by the
face?
gentleman from Maryland. With that, we yield back.
Gentleman yields back.
Again.
Mr. Raskin.
And Mr. Speaker, I yield the remainder of my time, which I think is 47 seconds, to the distinguished chairman of the Agriculture Committee, Mr. Scott of Georgia.
The gentleman from Georgia is allowed 30 seconds to close.
Well, thank you for that, Mr. Speaker, but what we're discussing tonight, isn't about us. It's about the will of the American people. They're brokenhearted, they're crying, they're discouraged, and the overwhelming number of American people want this president out of office.
Gone.
Now. This is why we got to do it now. We got to heal the wounds. The longer that president is over there, the more we're tearing the heart and soul out of the American people.
Gentleman's
Let us
time.
do it now.
The gentleman's time has expired. All time for debate has now expired. Pursuant to House Resolution 38, the previous question is ordered on the resolution and on the preamble as amended. The question is on adoption of the resolution. Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. The ayes have it. The ayes have it. The resolution is agreed to.
Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, I'd ask for a recorded vote.
Yeah, recorded.
Pursuant to Section 3 of the House Resolution 8, the yeas and nays are ordered. Members will record their votes by electronic device.
Okay, now, what's next?
The House is voting now on a resolution which would urge Vice President Pence and members of the cabinet to use the 25th Amendment to remove President Trump from office for his actions ahead of and during last week's attack on the U.S. Capitol. This will be the final vote of the evening. The House back tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. Eastern to consider a resolution of impeachment on President Trump for, quote, inciting an insurrection against the U.S. government. One note on the amendment on the resolution tonight, the vice president himself has written a letter to Speaker Pelosi telling her that he would not invoke the 25th Amendment and pleading with Congress not to go through with the resolution this evening. On the impeachment side of things, some 4 Republicans, led by Republican Conference Chair Liz Cheney, have said they would vote for impeachment tomorrow in the U.S. House. Again, that debate getting underway tomorrow morning. Our live coverage of the House on Wednesday at 9 a.m. Eastern.
Live from NPR News, I'm Jack Spear. Vice President Mike Pence, in a letter to House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, is now saying he would not favor invoking the 25th Amendment to remove President Trump from office. Meanwhile, former FBI Director James Comey added his name to the list of those who think impeachment is the appropriate punishment for the president for his role exhorting supporters to march on the U.S. Capitol last week.
Mr. Speaker, as the member designated
What purpose
by
does the
Mr.
gentleman
Baird
from
of
Indiana seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, as the member designated by Mr. Baird of Indiana, pursuant to H-Res 8, I inform the House that Mr. Baird will vote no on H-Res 21.
Maryland seek recognition.
Mr. Speaker, as the member designated by Ms. Alma Adams of North Carolina, pursuant to H-Res 8, I inform the House that Ms. Adams will vote yes on H-Res 21.
The violent assault left 5 people dead, including a U.S. Capitol police officer. Comey among those questioning why there was not better preparation given some of the extremist statements that were being made online.
Mr. Speaker, as the member designated by Mr. Peters, pursuant to H-Res 8, I inform the House that Mr. Peters will vote yes on H-Res 21. As the member designated by Mr. Liu, pursuant to H-Res 8, I inform the House Mr. Liu will vote yes on H-Res 21. As the member designated by Mr. Lowenthal, pursuant to H-Res 8, I inform the House that Mr. Lowenthal will vote yes on H-Res 21. As the member designated by Mr. Blumenauer, pursuant to H-Res 8, I inform the House that Mr. Blumenauer will vote yes on H-Res 21.
For what purpose does the gentleman from California seek recognition?
As the member designated by Mr. Vela pursuant to H-Res 8, I inform the House that Mr. Vela will vote aye on H-Res 21.
Required no imagination at all. This was just a failure because they were announcing they were coming. They were literally walking slowly down Pennsylvania Avenue. I don't know how the Capitol was not fortified in an adequate way, and I think it'll be really important for all of us to find that out with a commission-type examination.
Former FBI director also saying he hopes local prosecutors in New York continue their work going after Trump for what Comey called being a garden-variety criminal before he became president. The FBI says it's considering putting pro-Trump rioters who stormed the Capitol building on its no-fly list. NPR's Windsor Johnston reports the Senate's top Democrat says he's spoken to the agency amid threats of additional violence in Washington, D.C. and elsewhere in connection with the inauguration.
Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer says he's urging the FBI to ban all rioters who breach security at the U.S. Capitol building from boarding commercial flights. He says many of them meet the criteria for the federal no-fly list.
Acts of terror that, like those perpetrated by the people who unlawfully and violently breached the Capitol, must be considered threats to the homeland. Once you're considered a threat to the homeland, you should and must be placed on the no-fly list.
Schumer, the incoming Senate Majority Leader, says the violence at the Capitol also shows the need for the chamber to quickly confirm the incoming national security team. Windsor Johnston, NPR News, Washington.
The mayor of Michigan's capital city is requesting the governor activate that state's National Guard in response to possible armed protests that could take place there. Member station KAR in East Lansing, Carol Vega has more.
Lansing Mayor Andy Shore sent the request to Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer Tuesday following warnings from the FBI that armed protests would likely be taking place at state capitals nationwide in the coming days. In the request, Shore listed January 17th and 20th as specific dates on which to activate the Michigan National Guard to protect the State House and surrounding businesses. On Monday, a state commission banned the open carrying of firearms inside the Capitol building. Some state lawmakers, including Governor Whitmer, say the action doesn't go far enough. Last spring, armed protesters stormed the Michigan Capitol in opposition of the state's coronavirus stay-at-home orders. For NPR News, I'm Carell Vega in Lansing.
This is NPR. Drivers for app-based ride-hailing and delivery services say they are suing to overturn a California ballot initiative that would have defined them as independent contractors instead of employees eligible for benefits and job protections. Suit filed today in California Supreme Court contending that California's Proposition 22 is unconstitutional because it limits the power of the legislature to grant workers the rights to organize. An online fundraiser, Ratatouille, the TikTok musical based on the Disney Pixar animated film, brought in $2 million for the Actors Fund, a charity that helps people in the entertainment industry. Jeff London reports.
This fall, videos of crowdsourced songs based on the film about a rat who's a culinary genius showed up on TikTok. Fan art and lots of chatter followed. So some producers approached Disney to get the rights to the movie to create a 55-minute online production of Ratatouille, with Broadway actors, including Titus Burgess and Wayne Brady, to raise money for the Actors Fund. It premiered on New Year's Day and caught on. Over 350,000 people watched the video, raising $2 million, by far the most any single fundraiser has brought in for the nonprofit group. For NPR News, I'm Jeff London in New York.
Top Republican donor Sheldon Adelson has died, the billionaire mogul who built a casino empire that included properties from Las Vegas to China, dying from complications related to his treatment for non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. On Wall Street today, the Dow was up 60 points, the Nasdaq rose 36 points. I'm Jack Speer, NPR News.
And now, more from NPR.
This is What happened? What happened? Yes. Oh, my Lord.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Massachusetts seek recognition?
As the member designated by Ms. Frankel pursuant to HRes 8, I inform the House that Ms. Frankel will vote yes on HRes 21. As the member designated by Ms. Bonamici pursuant to HRes 8, I inform the House that Ms. Bonamici will vote yes on HRes 21.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Texas seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, as the member designated by, let's see, who am I? Pursuant to HRes 8, I inform the House that Ms. Fletcher will vote aye on HRes 21.
For what purpose does the gentlewoman from Illinois seek recognition?
As the member designated by Mr. Carson pursuant to HRes 8, I inform...
Start taking down names and kicking ass. Today is the day American patriots start taking down names and kicking ass.
That sounded like the Biden crime family guy. I think I heard his voice in there. It's hard to tell if you can... Yeah, you can see it. Okay, we got it. What else?
They will vote yes on HRes 21.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Tennessee seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, as the member designated by Mr. Fleischman of Tennessee pursuant to HRes 8, I inform the House that Mr. Fleischman will vote nay on HRes 21. As the member designated by Mr. Desjardins of Tennessee pursuant to HRes 8, I inform the House that Mr. Desjardins will vote nay on HRes 21.
Thanks, sir. Oh, my back. Ay, ay, ay.
For what purpose does the gentleman from New Jersey seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, as the member designated by Ms. Bonnie Watson Coleman pursuant to HRes 8, I inform the House that Ms. Watson Coleman will vote yes on HRes 21. And as the member designated by Mr. Albio Series pursuant to HRes 8, I inform the House that Mr. Series will vote yes on HRes 21. And as the member designated by Mr. Bill Pascrell pursuant to HRes 8, I inform the House that Mr. Pascrell will vote yes on HRes 21. And finally, Mr. Speaker, as the member designated by Mr. Paul Tonko pursuant to HRes 8, I inform the House that Mr. Tonko will vote yes on HRes 21. Thank you.
Thank you. Look at this. Breaking news. McConnell leads toward convicting Trump. Wow, there's better than a
purpose does gentleman from Kansas seek
chance.
recognition?
Mr. Speaker, as the member designated by Mr. LaTurner of Kansas pursuant to House Resolution 8, I inform the House that Mr. LaTurner will vote nay on House Resolution 21.
For what purposes, the gentleman from Washington seek recognition.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As the member designated by Ms. Strickland of Washington, pursuant to HRes 8, I inform the House that Ms. Strickland will vote yes on HRes 21.
I heard the previous speaker say that we are objecting to the president because we don't like the way he executes his duties. No, we don't like it at all. Acts of sedition, incitement to insurrection, treasonous activity. And if you are associating yourself with that,
For what
as
purpose
the
does the
proper
gentleman from
execution
Ohio
of the
seek
president,
recognition?
As a member designated by Mr. Gonzalez of Ohio, pursuant to House Resolution 8, I inform the House that Mr. Gonzalez of Ohio will vote no on HRes 21.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Pennsylvania seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, as the member designated by Mr. Lawson of Florida, 5th Congressional District, pursuant to House Resolution 8, I inform the House that Mr. Lawson will vote yea on H Resolution 21.
This just in from the Hill, Republican Fred Upton says he will vote to impeach Trump. How many's that? Enough? I think so. He's going down.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Connecticut seek recognition?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, as the member designated by Mr. Adam Smith of Washington State pursuant to HRes 8, I inform the House that Mr. Smith will vote yes on HRes 21.
For what purpose does the gentleman from California seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, as member designated by Congressmember Napolitano, pursuant to House Resolution 8, I inform the House that Congressmember Napolitano will vote yes on HRes 21.
Napolitano.
And Mr. Speaker, as member designated by Congressmember Costa, pursuant to House Resolution 8, I inform the House that Congressmember Costa will also vote yes on HRes 21.
AOC is live on the Instagram.
Now we are
For what purpose does the
just in the
gentleman
last
from Nebraska
24,
seek
48
recognition?
hours, our third member of a Democratic member of Congress who just tested positive for COVID because they were sheltering in that place. I myself did not even feel safe going to that extraction point because there were QAnon and white supremacist sympathizers and frankly white supremacist members of Congress in that extraction point who I know and who I had felt would disclose my location and allow me to who would create opportunities to allow me to be hurt, kidnapped, etc. And so I didn't even feel safe around other members of Congress. And to be kind of fending for yourself in that way is traumatizing. And frankly, I know for a lot of you, I don't even have to describe it because you've been through it in school lockdowns and you've been through it in false alarms, or if, God forbid, some of you have been through that I hope and I pray that none of you have ever been in a shooting, but if you have been in a shooting, you know what that feels like. And it is no joke, it's no joke. And that's what happened Wednesday. Now, what happens now? We know that Donald Trump cannot be president. We know that we cannot wait until January 19th. We cannot wait until January 20th. We cannot wait until Inauguration Day. He cannot be president right now. He should not have been president yesterday. He should not have been president the night of the attack. Because Republicans and the people around him are cowards.
Cowards.
They will not do it. And in fact, the secretaries, there is something known as so when people say, how do we get him out? How do we get him out? There are actually several avenues. So through the House and congressionally, there's impeachment. Through the president, through the president's cabinet and the vice president, there's the 25th Amendment. And what the 25th Amendment allows is, what the 25th Amendment allows for is essentially a majority of the president's cabinet and larger portion of the president's cabinet and the vice president have to move forward and declare the president essentially unfit, unwell, and that he must be deposed, or rather he must be removed from office. And that's what the 25th Amendment does. The president's cabinet, you have Secretary Elaine Chao, who is the wife of Mitch McConnell, by the way. Does that seem a little conflict of interest, inappropriate? I don't know. But regardless, she was the Secretary of Transportation. She resigned. Betsy DeVos has resigned. Acting Secretary of DHS, Department of Homeland Security, has resigned. And all of them are resigning rather than fulfilling their duties in enacting the 25th Amendment and removing the President of the United States.
Disgusting.
I have a message for anyone who is resigning after Wednesday. Too late.
Too late. Too late.
You're not going to resign after Wednesday and act like you weren't a part of it. Were you secretary on Wednesday? Yes, you were. You were a part of it. Were you secretary every single step leading up to Wednesday? Yes, then you were a part of it. You don't get to allow for an attack that kills 5 people, and then afterwards you say, I wasn't a part of it. Yes, you were. You were a part of it when you caged kids. You were a part of it when you repealed Title IX. You were a part of it when the president committed the first dozen number of crimes that he committed. You were a part of it when you excused the law breaking. You were a part of it. You were a part of it. You were a part of it. Those 5 people's blood is on your hands. What are you going to do? And they think that resigning is going to clean that blood off their hands. It is always on them. They are forever stained with the deaths of 5 people, especially when they did not invoke the 25th Amendment to remove this president when they had the power to do so. Cowards. Cowards.
Cowards.
Couldn't even stand up in the memory of these officers that they pretend to care about. I don't want to hear or see the Republican Party talk about blue lives ever again. This was never about safety for them. It was always a slogan. Because if they actually cared about rule of law, they would speak up when people break the law. They would speak up. They would enforce fairness and equity, but they don't give a damn about the law. They don't give a damn about order. They don't give a damn about safety. They give a damn about white supremacy. They care about preserving the social order and the mythology of whiteness than the grandeur of our democracy. That's what they care about. They lust for power more than they care about democracy. That's what those people did when they voted to overturn the results of our free and fair elections. And you can barely call them that with the amount of voter suppression that they have engaged in across the country. It is generous, to say the least, to call them that. And so with all of the rules rigged in their favor, the Electoral College is built on a compromise with slavers. The Senate is rigged in their favor. Gerrymandered districts are rigged in the Republicans' favor. This presidency and the law breaking and the pardons of people who have betrayed our country, all of it rigged in their favor, and they can't even win with the whole deck stacked with them. They can't even win with the deck stacked in their favor. And so what they are willing to do is set a match and light our entire democracy on fire so that they can uphold the social order of white supremacy. That's what this is about. Straight up. This is about thinking that if an election doesn't reinforce your power, then you believe it is fundamentally illegitimate. And why do you think it's illegitimate? And how do you try to delegitimize our elections? By saying black people shouldn't vote. By saying Latino people shouldn't be full US citizens. By trying to take away, strip citizenship away from people who already have it. We're not even getting to the denial of citizenship, a full civic personhood that this party engages in. We're talking about them trying to strip the citizenship away from anybody who isn't them. Anybody. And that's what this is about. That's what this is about. And that's what I mean when I say that their lust for power has driven them away from loyalty to democracy. So it's not just Trump that has to go. It's not just Trump that has to go. Because let me tell you something. When these rioters broke into our nation's capital, they flew the Confederate flag inside our nation's capital. Let me break down the historical significance of that for you. This happened. They flew the Confederate flag for the first time in American history in the U.S. Capitol. It didn't even make it in during the Civil War. And there were members cheering them on. Don't get it twisted. Don't let them act like they didn't. There were members who were supportive. You had a member of Congress from Colorado saying, "My people are outside." They flew the Confederate flag when it didn't even make it in during the Civil War. And they said, "Those are my people." So let me tell you something. Let me share this with every member of Congress who voted to overturn the results of our free and fair, again, a generous assessment election, to vote to overturn the results of our election. If any member of Congress so much as stutters to say that the Confederacy were traitors to the United States, that the Confederacy is a legion of white supremacists, if you so much as stutter to say that, turn in your pin and get out. Go join them. Why don't you go join them if you are so sympathetic to them? But you have no place in the capital of the United States of America, in the citadel of democracy, if that's the trash that you believe in. Because we will never go back. I'll tell you that right now. We will never go back. The only way forward is a multiracial democracy that fights for the economic rights of all people and the civil rights of all people, period. And they would rather see our country burn than to see them be shoulder to shoulder equal to others. That is the tragedy of white supremacy. The tragedy of white supremacy is that it is doomed to fail. It's doomed to fail. white supremacists will never, ever, ever live in a world where they will see their fantasies come true. Ever. Which is why they rely on violence. That's why they cling to violence so much, because there is no other way for them. There's no other way. Every other way is democratic and cooperative, where we all must share our genius with one another, where our society is not built on supremacy or on a politics of domination of one another. And they can't live in that world. They can't live in a world without supremacy, without domination. They can't live in a world where they can just coexist. No, they have to reign supreme. And since a white supremacist world, and since supremacy in general is a myth, it will never be true for anybody. Since supremacy is a myth, they have to resort to violence. They have to. Because there is no other way for them. But you know what? What is the result of that? Nothing. It's nihilism. It's just destruction. And then what claim will you have? That you rule over a destroyed society? That the ashes belong to you? Never. Never. And so I want to be clear to Senator Ted Cruz. You do not belong in the United States Senate. I want to be clear to Senator Josh Hawley. You do not belong in the United States Senate. You do not belong in any democratically elected seat when you do not believe that that election was even legitimate, according to your self-serving claims. So get out. If they had any shred of integrity about their claims, their lies really, but their claims about this election, they would take off their pin and turn it in. But this isn't about the truth to them. This is about if they want to be president in 2024. Let me give you a sneak peek. You will never be president. You will never command the respect of this country. Ever. Ever. And you should resign. So should every member of Congress that voted to overturn the results of our election. Because they would rather cling to power than respect our democracy. That is putting the short term above the long term. And so many of our problems, so many of our global problems, our societal problems are all the way down, comes down to that. It comes down to that. It comes down to putting the short-term gain and prioritizing small short-term gains and allowing them and just grabbing at them at the expense of long-term structural losses, right? That's everything. Where we prioritize this quarter's profits over long-term economic well-being for all people, right? That's why they're paying people
107,000 people watching live. Wow.
Less than a living wage. Sure, it may boost up your Q1 profits, but what happens down the road when no one can afford your goods? Same thing with climate change, right? Where we're burning all the fossil fuels in the world and we're clinging on to this system of fossil fuels because of the short-term profits that it bears, and we're allowing that to happen even though we know that it's causing long-term destruction of our planet. Media, same thing. The short-term, conflict-driven news cycles that get elevated every day that don't mean, frankly, shit. Sorry, I try not to curse on this thing.
That's all right.
But
Say it.
I'm
Say
upset,
it, sister. We're all
as you can
upset.
tell.
We are
And
all furious.
Bring up and froth up all of this short-term nonsense in our headlines, and they lose the long-term story every time, right? And then with our democracy, where you have members of Congress that are more interested in being, I don't know, a meme and driving a short-term news cycle and making policy decisions. And listen, I'm telling you this, I know as someone who wields social media, I understand that people may wield this critique about me, but I will tell you that when it comes to using social media, there's a very fine line between a member using it and social media using the member.
Hello.
And they are allowing themselves to be used, to be consumed, and to be radicalized, and to radicalize back. And they're making policy decisions based on that, instead of wielding it to speak to their constituents and make their case. Now, I know a lot of people may not understand that distinction, and so they're gonna run off in all of these accusations, but I'm telling you how it is. And so what they're doing is that they're playing to cameras, and they don't care about actually being a damn legislator to serve the people of the United States of America. They don't care. If they cared, they would have certified our democratic elections. If they cared, they wouldn't have amplified the lie. If they cared, they would have protected their colleagues instead of tweeting out their locations for the mob to find them. If they cared, they would have done and acted with integrity, but they didn't. They don't care.
They
They care about themselves. They care about their elections. They care about their next gig. They care about their money, their power, their fame. And this is how democracy can burn. It is fragile. We must cherish it. And they didn't. And they don't. So they need to leave.
Vote them out.
Donald Trump
Resign.
needs to leave.
Resign.
Ted Cruz needs to leave.
Ted Cruz.
Josh Hawley needs to get out.
Out.
They
We've
need to
had
get
enough.
Out. McCarthy, leader of the House Republicans, voted to overturn our elections. The same election that he was elected in, he voted to overturn. Steve Scalise voted to overturn our elections. Leaders of House Republicans, party leadership. This is like if Nancy Pelosi voted to overturn the results of our elections. You know, you have, each party has their leaders. Nancy Pelosi is leader in the House. McCarthy is the leader of Republicans in the House. Rather, Pelosi's leader of the Democrats, and she's Speaker. She's Speaker of the entire House. McCarthy is leader of the Republican parties in the House. He voted to overturn the results of our election. When his members were begging him for guidance, they were saying, what do we do in this moment? He did not provide any leadership to his own party. He cared about himself. He cared about supremacy. He cared about power and dominance over democracy. He needs to go. Scalise needs to go, along with anybody who sided with these Confederate traitors. a reminder that the Confederacy was not part of the United States, was never part of the United States, will never be a part of the United States. They are traitors to democracy. They are enemies of a multiracial democracy, and they will never have glory in our history, in our present, or in our future. Period. But what we have to do right now is that I need folks to understand that all of us have to strap in. Because the amount of people that have been radicalized in this country is very, very large. And it is deep. And this is a generational wound that we're going to have to fix. Because Ted Cruz can hang it up and leave. Josh Hawley can hang it up and leave. McCarthy can hang it up and leave. But they egged this on every step of the way because they thought it would win them a freaking election. And now we have to clean up the mess of a radicalized, and Mark Zuckerberg too.
Yep. Hello, Marky.
Mark Zuckerberg too.
He's not getting away with this.
Creating recommendation engines.
Yep.
Just funneling millions of people into white supremacist groups and organizations. He recommended it. He built the platform for it. He accelerated this. Many people are responsible for it. Many, many people are responsible. And, you know, we're going to have a lot of work to do because they created this mess. They created this violence for short-term gain, knowing the long-term loss, knowing the long-term cost. And they will do it over and over and over again until they experience personal consequences, because that's what all of this was about. Every step of the way, they gave up long-term cost to all of us, a long-term cost for all of us, for personal gain, personal gain, personal gain. And as long as they have a shred of personal gain to get in making the same decisions, they will continue to make them. That's why they gotta go.
Gotta go.
And that's why they need to experience consequences. Not because it's punishment, not because it's I'm getting back at you.
No.
But because consequences are the only way they will stop contributing to violence. It's the only way they will stop contributing to undermining our democracy. So they need to go. They need to get out. Mi familia en Texas, my family in Texas, get ready. Because if Ted Cruz doesn't resign, and if the Senate doesn't expel him, we got to take him out the old-fashioned way, and that means we need to organize and vote him out in an election. That's what we're just going to have to do. If he's not going to resign, if the Senate won't expel him, we have to support a challenger to him in an election. That's what it is. Josh Hawley, Missouri, he took that seat from a Democrat. Democrat can take it right back. Democrat can take that seat right back if he will not resign. He should be ashamed. But of course they're not ashamed.
Ashamed.
Of course they're not ashamed. He fist pumped insurrectionists that killed 5 people, 4 people, and potentially a 5th. We don't know. We don't know the full story. So that's what we got to do. We got to organize. And I think what we saw in Georgia is a really good example with Black women leading the way, with multiracial and multicultural organizations leading the way. They proved that southern states are not red states. They are suppressed states, which means the only way that our country is going to heal is through the actual liberation of southern states, the actual liberation of the poor, the actual liberation of working people from economic, social, and racial oppression. That's the only way. That's the only way. We just got to keep pushing. But tonight, the votes that happened were to urge Vice President Pence to invoke the 25th.
Yes.
And then tomorrow we vote on impeachment.
Right.
We will be impeaching the President of the United States tomorrow. And while it's a little late for some Republicans to try to scramble together a reputation, you know, maybe if there's anyone in that party left who is willing to not only act out of selfish interests, maybe you should vote to impeach him, not because of the way it'll game out for you politically. Maybe you should vote to impeach him because he's an active threat to every single American.
How about that?
And that you should help us actually save our country for once.
How about that? How about you do that? How's that? Can you do it? Huh?
Maybe you should just do it because it's the right thing to do.
Oh, okay. Do it.
Instead of what you can build a freaking email list off of.
Honest to God.
Or whoever's paying you or paying your campaign to do whatever it is that you do. Why don't you just vote because it's the right thing to do? And maybe you can vote tomorrow on a different thing based on you thinking it's the right thing to do. And the day after that, maybe you can vote on something else in the way that you vote on it because you think it's the right thing to do and not because of the political pressures of the donor class and what they put on you and the way that they make you feel like you can justify it to yourself. Maybe we should just start voting on things based on whether we think it's right or not.
How about
and
that?
Stop pretending that this shit's complicated.
Okay. There you go.
Because it's not.
It's not that complicated. Do what's right.
You're either with the people or you're with those or you're with that mob. It's pretty clear cut. Anyways.
Anyway, that was great.
I'm going to answer some questions.
Oh, okay.
Now that I went off on my rant.
Okay.
Happy to answer some of your questions. I want to pull up the question tab real quick. See what I can do.
Just taking questions. And this just in,
Someone
Donald
said,
Trump's
"Can you
YouTube
please
channel
save this
suspended.
live? I jumped in late. Yes, I can save the live.
CNN reporting. YouTube suspending Donald Trump's channel at least one week,
What does it mean
maybe
to impeach
more.
Trump for a second time? Well, what it means is that the House has found him or will be finding him guilty of another crime, a second crime. This crime, the article of impeachment that will be filed will be insurrection against the United States. President ordered an attack on this country. If another head of state went into that lawn and did what he did, I think it would be considered pretty widely by many people as a very
Trump won. Oh, Jesus.
violent and provocative attack. And there would be a response. And there should be a response to this violent and provocative attack. So the thing is so what happens when impeachment gets voted for? So impeachment managers have been announced, and impeachment managers are several members of the House. I don't have the full list in front of me, but Jamie Raskin is an impeachment manager. Joe Neguse of Colorado will be an impeachment manager. Stacey Plaskett. So my Virgin Island fam, your member of Congress is going to be an impeachment manager. Joaquin Castro will be an impeachment manager.
A1B of House
Several
Resolution
others.
8.
I apologize, I don't have the whole list in front of me.
Until 9
Will
a.m.
be
tomorrow.
impeachment managers.
Oh.
And essentially what that means is
The
that
House
once the House
gaveling
votes
out after
on
approving a
impeachment,
non-binding
impeachment
resolution.
managers
Okay.
essentially
They
walk
approved
over
it.
the articles of impeachment to the Senate. The Senate essentially convenes into kind of like a court in its setup. And the impeachment managers essentially act as prosecutors in the case against the president. And so that would be the next step in the impeachment proceedings against Donald Trump. And if he is convicted, if enough Republicans are vote to convict the president, he may be removed from office. He will be barred from ever pursuing federal office ever again. There's also the potential for him to not be able to pardon himself in
No
crimes
wonder I'm not getting it. Hold on.
associated with the impeachment charges. So that among potentially other consequences are what is up for impeachment. And when we talk about removal from office, there are several ways that Donald Trump can vacate his seat. He can resign. As you can imagine, the odds of that are relatively slim because he's a narcissist. But he could resign. That is one option. There is the 25th Amendment, where the vice president and the cabinet remove the president, and there is impeachment. Some folks have also looked into the 14th Amendment, which explicitly talks about removal due to insurrection. And so there is some kind of exploring there, but the task ahead of us and the most clear-cut path right now is impeachment or the 25th. Mike Pence has said that he doesn't want to invoke the 25th, and so we are pursuing impeachment. Looking at some of your other questions here.
Some people think he still won. I'm just seeing some comments from a while ago.
Would we know the verdict tomorrow? So the verdict won't happen immediately tomorrow. Tomorrow, we will know the consequences of the House vote. So we will know if Donald Trump will be impeached tomorrow. So let me back up. There's two parts of actual removal of the president. There's impeachment and then there's conviction. And so we will find out if the House will impeach Donald Trump tomorrow. Spoiler, is probably going to happen. We have the votes. But we will officially find out tomorrow if the House has a successful vote on impeachment. So we find out the president will be impeached tomorrow. But now on his conviction and whether he is convicted and whether he is removed, that is then up to the Senate. And so it's just like a trial, right? So we find out if he's being impeached, almost like when you have indictments or charges, etc. That's what's happening in the House. The House then walks over those articles, and then the trial begins. The trial happens in the Senate. And then we find out if the Senate convicts. And so that will happen at a later date. We don't have a specific day or date because there's still some things happening in the Senate. So we'll learn more on that process as time goes on. But that is what will happen.
Am I losing the stream? Let me check my bandwidth. A lot of
Will the trial
buffering.
continue out after he is out of office if needed? Yes. There is nothing that prevents.
I don't know what happened.
There is nothing that prevents an impeachment hearing, against Donald Trump, even if the trial kind of bleeds into or after he leaves office. Is there any point in conviction after inauguration? Yes, there is. One of the biggest points is that it prevents Donald Trump from ever holding federal office ever again. And so, as you know, he lost.
He lost.
Donald Trump lost.
He lost
the election. He lost.
He
didn't even win the popular vote last time. So I don't know why so many members are surprised that he lost this time. But he lost. And so it would potentially mean, technically, that he would be able to run for president again. And so conviction, even after the inauguration, would prevent him from ever being able to run for president again, or ever even being able to threaten to run for president again. So it does have a benefit. Because he lost.
He lost? Did he lose? I think he lost.
Let's see, just looking at some of the other questions you guys have here. Someone said, do you think violence will continue after the election? It is my prayer that it doesn't. And I hope that it does not. But that being said, you know, we saw this violence before the election. What we saw in Kenosha with the killing of protesters, what we saw in just mass shooting after shooting after shooting. They're often done by radicalized white supremacists. And that is a problem that doesn't go away. You can't vote that problem away. And that really, at the end of the day, is just the ultimate severity of the issue that we have at hand. The people who are dangerous today will continue to be dangerous the day after the election. And it's going to take a lot of work to, you know, heal.
We gotta
I will
heal.
say that it is possible.
Stop the steal, start the heal.
We held these, we did these hearings. I serve as the vice chair on the subcommittee for civil rights on oversight. And we did a lot of hearings about
My
white
internet, I think,
supremacy,
is...
and white supremacist groups. Last year, how they try to infiltrate law enforcement. You know, there were people who testified that a lot of these white supremacist organizations, he testified about his experience, and he was a person who was a neo-Nazi, and through a transformative experience that he had in his life, he de-radicalized. He was able to extract himself from that, and now he has dedicated his life to trying to de-radicalize others. And educate people about what he saw and what he experienced in his time being radicalized in a white supremacist organization. And one of the things that he had said was that in his group, in the group that he was in, you know, they were actively told to not get tattoos and to not get specifically white supremacist affiliated tattoos, because it would make it easier for them to get into law enforcement, because if you have those tattoos, you can be disqualified quite early. So I say that because it just indicates just a crumb of the work that we have to do, because a lot of people have drank the poison.
Some of them are right in my chat room.
And that's what Donald Trump represents.
Poison.
Just is.
Did he
And
lose?
if at
He
this point
lost.
You haven't recognized that and you don't see it.
Tell them, AOC. Tell them. They're right here.
Maybe you have a lot of work to do too.
Yeah, we all do. Stop the steal, start the heal.
We have a lot of work.
We all do.
But that's a real big issue that we have. Someone said, I'm seeing here $2,000 checks. Is that also a priority? Yes, it is a priority. We are fighting, The first thing that's on the table, I think, is a real COVID relief package, because people didn't get a real COVID relief package. $600 is a joke. And so what we're fighting for is for retroactive unemployment.
Retroactive?
For $2,000 checks.
Yes.
For expanded state and local funding, so schools can actually be funded to do the retrofits that they need to be healthy.
You have my attention.
We can fund mass testing and tracing. You know, all of it.
All of it. I want it all.
So
I want it all. Retroactive.
It's absolutely
$2,000 a month.
And I'm just looking forward to us getting past this nightmare. But we are going to get past it. And this is something we're going to have to live with. Student loans, yes. Absolutely, that's going to be a huge priority. Climate change, huge priority. Let's see. Any discussion in Congress about federal truth and reconciliation or media literacy initiatives to help with healing? I definitely, I can't say, I don't think that the response, this kind of like medium term response has fully crystallized yet. But what I can say is that there's absolutely a commission that's being discussed, but it seems to be more investigatory in style rather than truth and reconciliation. And so I think that's an interesting concept for us to explore. And, you know, I do think that several members of Congress in some of my discussions have brought up media literacy, because that is a part of
media
what
literacy.
happened here.
Yeah, for sure. I like that. I'm going to have to look into that.
We're going to have to figure out how we rein in our media environment so that you can't just spew disinformation and misinformation. It's one thing to have differing opinions, but it's another thing entirely to just say things that are false. And so that's something that we're looking into. Some folks are asking what I'm doing for my own healing. Thank you for that question. You know, I think I'm still figuring it out. So far, I've just been trying to give myself a lot of rest. And I definitely know that my body and my brain have been at work, because I've had like 2 days since the attack where I just slept a lot more than I usually sleep. And that to me is telling me that my body's going through something and my brain is trying to heal. And so I'm just trying to give myself as much rest as possible. I'm sure I'm going to talk to somebody and just, you know, seek and discuss with a counselor, just to make sure that we can get started on that path, on the right step. And I'm not ashamed to say that, because I think we should all, nobody should be ashamed to say that if anything happens to you, you know, so many people in our country have lost a loved one due to COVID. And the trauma of this past year has just impacted, I wouldn't be surprised if it was millions of people. I think millions of people have been traumatized in the last year alone. And so if I want to be a good leader and set a good example, I have to show that I'm willing to do the steps that I think everybody should be willing to do if they've gone through trauma. And so I will keep you updated. Honestly, I will admit that I haven't done a ton of work on that front since Wednesday. I've just been resting and sleeping. And, you know, I have been doing work because I have to work, but I've been sure to not try to bury what happened in work, which, you know, if I'm going to be completely honest, I was 18 years old when my father passed away, also a traumatizing event. and he was, you know, I was with him. I saw it happen. And when I was 18 years old, I know that my response was to bury myself in work. And I was, you know, we all have different responses, and my response was to be like very, you know, I went back to school and I tried to raise my GPA, and like I was doing all these clubs and all this other stuff, and it was really just, you know, dealing with it by not dealing with it in a way. And I think as a consequence, it took me a long time to really process what happened and the loss of my dad at a young age. And I feel like it really took me maybe 10 years to really process what happened because I kept not processing it. And so, you know, I think that's just because like you're okay, or just because you know, you're able to go to school and do well and maintain a job and, you know, what have you, it doesn't mean that that thing hasn't hurt you. And you need to be able to process that hurt so that you can be your best self and that you can integrate what happened. And, you know, I don't think any of this makes any person broken. I just think that, you know, I don't think anyone makes it through life unscathed. Things are going to happen to all of us. And that is just, you know, it's an essential fact of life. It is really sad. But, you know, to live through this life is to often mean to lose loved ones or to live through trauma, or to, you know, be exposed to things like that. And the best thing that we can do is to move through them and heal through them in a healthy way. Because if we can move through them in a healthy way, then that means we can end those cycles of trauma and prevent it from happening from someone else, right? Because trauma can often be very cyclical. Like they say, hurt people hurt people.
Hurt people.
We can stop these cycles of hurt, right? Like when a white supremacist storms the front of the Capitol and engages in this highly violent event, that could lead even a person who was a victim of that violence to have their heart turn black and to, you know, succumb to
Sounds
this
like my roommate,
which may lead them to make a decision that hurts other people or spreads negativity, and then the cycle goes on and on and on. And a big part of our responsibility is in healing. You know, a great thing about healing trauma is that you can stop those cycles. And you can stop those cycles of harm. You can stop those cycles of hurt. And so, you know, sometimes that trauma can be, to some person may seem like, you know, it's mild. And I don't want to put things on some hierarchy of like, oh, someone went through something way worse or what have you. You know, sometimes you have a very neglectful or verbally abusive parent. That is traumatizing. And so when we heal through that, whether it's that or whether it's something as traumatizing as, you know, living through Wednesday's attack, you know, I think that is, that's a big part of how we can make the world better. And that's how we can heal the world. And sometimes your trauma, isn't just about hurting other people, but sometimes you hurt yourself. Like, you think that you are less than what you are, or you don't think you're worthy, or you've internalized it in a way, and it hurts the world because it prevents the world from really experiencing your brilliance and your greatness. And so, anyways, all of this is to say, I hope you are okay. I feel okay so far, but we also know that these things have a long tail. And so, I just wish each and every one of you really well, and I will continue to be providing you updates as time goes on.
Okay.
Right.
AOC, thank you very much. There she goes. AOC. As we look at the countdown, 7 days, 12 hours, 11 minutes, 35 seconds until it's all over. By the way, I just saw a tweet from Geraldo Rivera saying his loyal friend hounded without mercy by Democrats intent on destroying him from day one. Then he lost the election. It made him crazy, or revealed a dysfunction I had refused to see. He then unleashed a mob to make war on their own government. 5 to their doom. Liz Cheney is right. Geraldo Rivera supports impeachment. What? What is happening? And then, of course, the House is set to consider impeachment tomorrow. It's all over. It's all over. He lost. That's it for me. Thanks for being here. We'll see you next time. Unless there's breaking news overnight, which there might be.